It's third time lucky for Joe Biden as he officially becomes the Democratic Party's presidential nominee. But does he have what it takes to beat Donald Trump? I'm Ali Aslan, and today's newsmaker is Joe Biden. He's got decades of political experience, including 2 terms as vice president. But will that be enough to get Joe Biden elected? At the Democratic National Convention this week, Speaker after Speaker has been heaping praise on the candidate. But it's a regular voter Biden needs to connect with. Almost every poll puts the Democratic nominee ahead of Trump as the favorite to win in November. But it was the same with Hillary Clinton 4 years ago. And if we learn anything from the last election, it's that nothing in American politics is ever certain. Natalie Pahonen reports on how Biden is hoping his experience will get him over the finishing line.
We the people call the 48th Quadrennial Democratic National Convention to order.
This is a convention unlike any other. The coronavirus pandemic means the entire audience is virtual, but the goal, to build enthusiasm and rally the party faithful ahead of the November election, remains unchanged.
263 votes for our next president, Joe Biden!
Democrats are presenting Joe Biden as a safe pair of hands, a moderate who can appeal to voters across the aisle with his decades of experience. Internal party divisions which marked the 2016 DNC have been put to the side. They've been replaced with a united front. And it has one objective: to remove President Donald Trump from office.
Whenever we look to this White House for some leadership or consolation or any semblance of steadiness, what we get instead is chaos, division, and a total and utter lack of empathy.
Nero fiddled while Rome burned. Trump golfs. His actions fanned this pandemic, resulting in over 170,000 deaths.
The open condemnation of a sitting president is a break with tradition, but it is the strategy the Democrats are pinning their political future on. The White House's response to the COVID-19 crisis and the Black Lives Matter movement has shaped the Democratic platform. Biden and his vice presidential running mate Kamala Harris are offering a complete break from the Trump administration.
We're going to get to work fixing the mess that President Trump and Vice President Pence have created, both at home and abroad.
The US has the world's highest number of coronavirus cases and deaths. If elected, Biden says the top priority will be addressing the health emergency and its economic fallout.
Masking, clear science-based guidance, dramatically scaling up testing.
Alongside policies to change the healthcare system, combat the climate crisis, and creating a more equitable economy, a pillar of the Biden-Harris platform is to address long-standing racial inequalities.
We're experiencing a moral reckoning with racism and systemic injustice that has brought a new coalition of conscience to the streets of our country, demanding change.
When it comes to foreign policy, Biden's plan is to undo Trump's America First approach, in essence returning to the diplomatic style of past administrations. Prominent Republican Colin Powell described Biden as the commander-in-chief the US needs.
With Joe Biden in the White House, you will never doubt that he will stand with our friends and stand up to our adversaries, never the other way around.
If elected, an experienced hand would be returning to the White House. It's just a question of whether Biden's style of leadership is what voters want. Natalie Pahonen, The Newsmakers.
Well, let's cross over now to Washington, D.C., where I am joined by former CEO of the Democratic National Committee, Jess O'Connell. Aaron Kall is in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He's the author of Debating the Donald and the director of the debate at the University of Michigan. And in Nevada City, California is Branko Marcetic, who wrote the book Yesterday's Man, The Case Against Joe Biden. Welcome to you all. Jess, Joe Biden is now officially the presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. Is he the right choice?
Oh, absolutely. And I think we had a very robust primary presidential process that I was a part of to ensure that we did choose the right person to meet this particular moment. And I think what Americans told us through that process is that they really wanted someone that was someone that they knew and someone who brought the experience that was going to be needed to lead us through not only the current crises, but lead us into the future. And so I think that was very clear through the process. And the great news is that the Democrats have a tremendous bench. Obviously, we have Kamala Harris, who will get the nomination for vice president tonight. And that pairing, I think, really speaks to where Americans are right now, Democrats, Republicans. And as we're seeing, some Republicans and independents are with us as well.
Erin, the Democratic Party has a deep bench, says Jess, and indeed, this was a very long process to get to this moment, to get to Joe Biden as the official candidates. Are you content with the outcome, of the final outcome now?
Yes, no, I think it was a long process. It was somewhat similar to the 2015 Republican process that produced Donald Trump. Obviously, many candidates, and for Joe Biden, really, what was key was getting several of them to drop out of the race, and he was the last person standing. When you had a larger field, with some of the candidates, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, and others, they dropped out, and then everyone immediately coalesced around Vice President Biden, starting in South Carolina, and he's both in national and swing state polls since then, consistently had a lead over the president. So from that metric, definitely yes.
Branko, clearly the Democratic Party cannot wait to depose Donald Trump come November. Is Joe Biden the right man to do it?
I'm not really sure. I mean, we have just seen over the last month, even as the pandemic has been raging across the United States, 3 million people infected, more than 50,000 killed, Trump acting erratically, acting in a very authoritarian way. Biden has somehow lost support in a lot of polls. There was a big CNN poll where his lead was slashed. There was a Washington Post, ABC poll where his lead was cut by about 2 points, and another one, a Wall Street Journal NBC poll. His polling average has also fallen. So he's still got a massive lead against Trump. But to me, that is incredibly concerning. The fact that things have gone so out of control in the United States under Trump, and yet somehow Biden has lost that support. It remains to be seen whether that's going to keep happening, or whether he's going to bounce back and keep going into November. But the track record of centrists and moderates against particularly hard right Republicans in the United States is not particularly good. They tend to lose, as John Kerry did against George Bush, as Mondale and Dukakis did against Reagan. So we'll have to see.
We'll have to see, indeed. Jess, indeed, when we look into the inner lives of the Democratic Party, it's no secret that there are segments and fringes that are not enthusiastic, to put it mildly, about this candidate. Obviously, the Bernie Sanders supporters, the AOC's, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who didn't even mention Joe Biden yesterday at the convention. There seems to be a moral dilemma. Many people, or the socialist fringes, see Biden as just another conservative corporatist candidate. Do you think Biden can now unify and reconcile these sides come November?
I think there's no question that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to unify the country to defeat Donald Trump. There's absolutely no question about that. And I can tell you one thing they're not focused on is polls. They're focused on the American people. This crisis with COVID that's happening right now, both in health and mortality and economic loss, is overwhelming the country. And we do not have the national leadership that's needed. And progressives and every strain of our big tent that makes up Democrats, that I think in this election is going to include a whole bunch of independents and some Republicans as well. All of them are focused on job number one, which is defeating Donald Trump. We can certainly have, and we will have, really robust policy conversations once we get that done. But right now, with democracy under assault in the United States, with so much at stake in this election around COVID, around restoring our standing around the world, and all of the agreements that Donald Trump and his administration have cast aside that impact not just us, but everyone around the world. This election is mission critical, and everyone is on board. And with respect with Congresswoman AOC, that was a formality in terms of the process last night. She was asked to do the second nomination for Bernie Sanders. That is a standard thing that happens when you reach a certain delegate count. And she did that. She's been a supporter of his for a long time. It makes a lot of sense that she did that. And I thought her speech was great. She is a rising star in this country, and we're going to hear more from her, not less, as time goes on.
Indeed, though. But Erin, there's no denying that 4 years ago, everybody thought the election was a shoo-in, that Hillary Clinton would be the next president. Part of the reason is many Democratic supporters did not turn out for her, mainly the so-called Bernie bros. And again, we have the same issue now, don't we? I mean, a lot of people see Joe Biden perhaps as the lesser evil or the electable candidates out there. Would you concur?
There definitely is an enthusiasm gap that Trump is, certainly his voters are more enthused, and his base has been very strong and not abandoning him during this tumultuous time. So there is that, but there's some advantages, I think, this time for Vice President Biden compared to 4 years ago. I think the reconciliation of the party that has come earlier. Bernie Sanders has been very gracious, and the nominating contest has been over for several months, and that process didn't take as long this time. And I think, as alluded to earlier, Kamala Harris, a big part of her being the vice presidential selection is to energize those voters that stayed home in places like Detroit and Milwaukee last time. And so those Midwestern states are going to be critical for Joe Biden to win. So they made me not be as excited about him at the top of the ticket, but bringing on someone like Harris, I think, is really meant to help that and should aid in turnout efforts this time.
Branko, did the Democratic Party go for electability rather than the best candidate?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look at polling, exit polling, and even now, why people are voting for Biden, it's overwhelming to get rid of Trump. In exit poll after exit poll in states, even that Bernie Sanders had lost quite badly, voters were overwhelmingly in favor of his policy positions, whether Medicare for All or Green New Deal. People went for Biden because of the idea that he was uniquely suited to get rid of Trump. And so unless he delivers on that, the party may be in a very tight spot. Just on the subject of unity, there's definitely been more of a attempt to kind of put on a united front this time around. Sanders obviously has come into this campaign very early, and the fact that the convention is remote makes it impossible for people to protest that kind of thing. But I don't really see that much unity in the party. I mean, hundreds of Bernie Sanders delegates actually voted against the party platform because it didn't have Medicare for All, which is Sanders' flagship policy, in which they argue in the middle of a pandemic, when people are losing their health insurance and healthcare is more important than ever, that this needs to be on the ballot. So, these strains, these tensions in the party, they haven't gone away. You can't see them because, very luckily for the party, everything's gone remote. But, whether Biden will be able to actually unite that front of the party if he becomes president, I think is doubtful. And so that's going to create conflict, even if he wins going into January.
And Jess, should Joe Biden win in November, certainly there's no shortage of challenges awaiting for him. Certainly the U.S. right now in the midst of a pandemic, racial tensions, the Black Lives Matter movement, obviously, and the economic fallout of the COVID-19 crisis. Is he up for all these challenges?
Oh, absolutely. And again, I think, whether it's debates over the platform or debates about who your candidate was. We had 27 candidates that ran for office to be president of the United States. People are coming together for exactly those reasons, that we've got to buckle down. And Joe Biden is an experienced leader. And I think, look, I was a senior advisor for Pete Buttigieg in the presidential primary. And I am in favor of a lot of the generational change that we see coming. But I also understand the moment that we are in and the leadership and steady hand that Joe Biden will bring to these issues. And I think what we've seen, even through the platform process, is he is bringing people to the table. This is how he's going to govern. He is bringing all of the different groups, including progressives, including Bernie Sanders, supporters, to the table to talk about the issues that matter most. And racial and economic justice and equality are going to be front and center as we move forward, in addition to healthcare, beating back COVID, restoring our place and leadership in the world, and handling the economic crises that Americans are going to continue to face. But we're going to do that together. And of course, there's going to be disagreements along the way, but that's what's going to make us stronger. And there is no dissension. We have got to defeat Donald Trump. Everything is at stake right now.
Erin, you wrote a book called Debating the Donald, and that is exactly what Joe Biden has to do in the coming weeks. What advice would you give him when facing the incumbents?
Yes, it'll really be other than the conventions, the last major issues, major event that could impact the race. And so they'll be very important. Tens of millions of people will be watching. The first piece of advice is just to, do no harm, no kind of major gaffe. Something like a Rick Perry moment, or that could really put questions into him and cause some people to reconsider their vote. And just be really steady. He has had a lot of recent opportunity to debate and practice, and against some very formidable Democratic debaters like Bernie Sanders and others. I think he held himself well in the March debate, and that was just a one-on-one debate. Lowering expectations going to the debate is important because these 90-minute debates can really be just a contest of expectations, and if people, as long as he can be even-keeled for the debates, then he could come off as the winner, or certainly do what's necessary to maintain his lead in the polls. And so just do what he's been doing. He has a very long career in terms of debating, and maybe channeling back to his vice presidential debate, the last major one against Paul Ryan, where there was a lot of pressure on him after a poor President Obama performance, and really steadied the campaign. And so just looking to emulate that, and look at some of his past best debates for going up against a very formidable President Trump on the debate stage.
Branko, certainly no shortages of domestic challenges, whoever will be the president come November, but also on the international front. No, I mean, the U.S. at the end of the day is still a very, very important player on the international stage. Donald Trump, of course, famously coined the term America first. Joe Biden, though, seems to be a bit more of an interventionist, looking at his past. Secretary of Defense, former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates says Biden has been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy issue over the past 4 decades. He has supported the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq, and even suggested the U.S. should actively interfere in other countries' democratic elections. Where do you see the difference between the two come November? And beyond, of course.
Well, I wouldn't quite say that Trump is an interventionist. I mean, Trump has definitely, ramped up drone bombings and special forces strikes and that kind of thing. So in that sense, he is interventionist. I think he's a skeptic of international and multilateral organizations and alliances like NATO. But he's every bit the warmonger as a lot of other politicians in the United States, unfortunately, are. As for Biden, I mean, I think Biden does have a troubling history of supporting wars overseas. He didn't start out that way. He was very much a Vietnam dove back in the 70s, but around the Reagan era, he very explicitly said that, for electoral reasons, Democrats need to become less unwilling to use force. And so, yeah, as you say, he's supported the Iraq War, he supported the invasion of Afghanistan. To his credit, he did oppose the surge in Afghanistan when he became vice president. He reportedly opposed the disastrous invasion of Libya by Obama. But at the end of the day, I think partly it's going to be Biden's judgment, but partly it's also going to be who he actually puts into his government to run foreign policy.
And of course, Joe Biden, Branko, if I may again heap on the point of Joe Biden asking or suggesting that the U.S. should actively interfere in other countries' democratic elections. He has supported the Venezuelan opposition leader who declared himself president. He just recently called for the U.S. to embolden the Turkish opposition here in order to remove President Erdogan. What do you make of those statements?
Yeah, I mean, it's very troubling. I mean, unfortunately, the Venezuela aspect, definitely continuity with the Trump administration there, but that is virtually the entire spectrum of U.S. politics believes that they have the right to interfere in Venezuela's politics. Of course, there was a failed coup that was U.S. backed back in the Bush years. There was the coup against Honduras as well. A country that's very much in that sphere of influence, let's say. With Erdogan, so that interview came in December 2019. It was very much in the middle of campaigning at the high point. This was a big moment for Biden and all the candidates. They were trying to get an endorsement from the New York Times. What I suspect Biden was doing was kind of trying to contrast himself with Trump, who was being criticized for being too obsequious with Erdogan. And so he was trying to say and kind of signal how tough he would be compared to Trump. Unfortunately, Biden has never been the most disciplined speaker, and that's only gotten worse since he's kind of reappeared on the national stage since 2016. And so I think he kind of went a little far and talked about essentially trying to support the Turkish opposition against Erdogan. Whether that's going to happen, it remains to be seen. It could just be bluster, again, for the campaign purposes. His foreign policy advisors, Tony Blinken, Julianne Smith, they've talked about how they need to repair Turkish-U.S. relations. And of course, Obama, and many people from the Obama administration are coming into
Jess,
Biden administration.
if I bring in Jess, what do you make of Branko's criticism that, can I just ask the question, that U.S. Biden at the end of the day is not a disciplined speaker. He lacks discipline and acts a bit like a loose cannon, not the qualities you want in the leader of the free world, no?
Well, to compare Joe Biden to a loose cannon when we have a current sitting president who is absolutely a loose cannon is a step too far for me. But let's just step back for 1 second and understand that what we know for sure is that Joe Biden is going to focus on restoring relationships with our allies. Joe Biden understands who our allies are, who our friends are historically, and how to work with them to get things done and ensure safe, secure world to the best that we can. He also understands who's working against us, who's actively working against us. We had a Senate intelligence report that came out today that showed the highest levels of Trump's campaign in 2016, working with the Russians to impact the election. That has now been proven time and time again. Joe Biden understands exactly what we're up against and what needs to happen. As we move forward, the other thing is that Joe Biden is actually interested in these things. He will take his briefings. He will read his briefings. He will be briefed by many members of the military. Last night, we saw in all of the national security experts that came out. Historically, national security experts and military folks, they remain bipartisan. They try to stay above the fray. We've seen under the era of Donald Trump, people have to come out reluctantly to endorse Joe Biden because they are so afraid of what Donald Trump and this administration is doing and their lack of interest and concerns about national security and the look ahead globally. So let's just start with the basics. That's where we are today, and that's the moment that we're in.
Erin, you have already mentioned the lead that Joe Biden holds over Donald Trump in the polls. Any surprises come November?
Sure. I mean, 2.5 months is a lifetime in a campaign cycle, and we still have the end of the Democratic convention, and then the RNC next week, the 3 debates, which will be 90 minutes each. But then, people are talking about different kind of surprises. There could be, a big advance in vaccine or therapeutics around coronavirus. Could have some kind of October surprise involving indictments from the Justice Department surrounding the Russian investigation and those participated in that. So there's a lot of things that could occur. And I think because people have such skepticism, given, like you mentioned, the poll showed one thing last time and then there was a different result. And so a lot of things can happen between now and November for sure.
We're almost out of time, so just briefly, Branko, what do you make of the coming weeks and months, less than 100 days until the election? Is Joe Biden, is he going to be crowned the next president come November?
I mean, it's impossible to say. Everyone, including myself, thought Clinton was going to win in 2016, and of course that didn't happen. Right now, for example, 538, has given Biden the same odds of winning as Clinton had in 2016. Of course, we saw how that happened. There's so many variables that could happen. You know, I think it all depends on, is the current strategy that the Democrats have taken going to work? Because what they're betting on is that Trump is just going to continue to sort of lose control of the country. Things are going to keep spiraling downwards. And therefore, even if Biden doesn't really appear on TV much and doesn't really campaign, people will just vote for him instinctually just to get rid of Trump. You know, it's been working so far. Right. But again, given the fact that the polls show that the race has slightly tightened over the course of the period where the virus and the domestic situation.
Just 20 seconds. I want to give you 20 seconds before we wrap up.
Americans are going to turn out for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, no question about it. The only question that remains is whether we're going to have free and fair elections, and that is going to be really important in the coming days to make sure that we do.
Jess O'Connell, Branko Marcetic, and Erin Kall, thank you so much for your insights. Certainly very suspenseful weeks and months ahead of us. Thank you out there for watching, and hope to see you again next time for a new edition of Newsmakers.